Is there anything that we're working on that you'd like to see more of or less of? And, our hope is that we can take any feedback received here today into our, strategic planning meeting in 2022. So I'll stop there. If any board members would, like to share anything or speak, or if anybody's got information coming to them in chat, and we'll turn it over.
Julia, this is Katina. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So thank you very much, Chairwoman, for setting the stage for this, sharing with the community what's been going on. I think as we begin this part of the agenda, it might be useful to speak to what the board's mandate happens to be under the ordinance, to give folks maybe a sense of, the scope of the work that we can do. And then also maybe it might provide some, inspiration, or give folks some ideas of things that they think it might be good for us to look at. And I can kind of just recite them off the top of my head, if that's okay. One is obviously assessing the effectiveness of the Office of the Independent Monitor. It's the monitor's ability to do the job, the office's ability to do the job, and whether they're capable of doing it, and how effective they are. Second is making policy recommendations regarding various issues associated with discipline, use of force, and it kind of goes on. Hiring, recruiting, any issues really kind of that are policy related and associated with the departments of public safety, the sheriff's department or the police department. And then I think sort of finally, there's just issues of concern for the community, and we may or may not have the jurisdiction to address them, but certainly we want to hear from folks if there's something that does provide an opportunity for us to have dialogue, because we do have the advantage, or I guess the opportunity, to communicate with leaders in public safety on a regular basis pursuant to the ordinance, which I think is a sort of a direct access approach that allows us to speak to issues that the community may have, even if we don't have the authority to change it.
Thank you. That's awesome context. I know a question came in to the Q&A. Are you going to implement the 112 task force recommendations into the new Office of the Independent Monitor? And so I can take that, and other board members feel free to chime in. So the first thing is that the task force recommendations are expansive and comprehensive in their thinking. So certainly they do not all address or relate to the work of the independent monitor. And in some cases, even the work of the Department of Public Safety, things like housing, homelessness, et cetera, programs that are handled in multiple parts of the city. So to the degree that those, don't apply to the work of the OIM, that won't be necessarily a focus of ours. What I can say too is that we have just recently begun re-engaging with the task force to really get deep on the work and where we can share initiative and effort. That is, very much in initial conversations, but finding ways for, shared progress can be incredibly valuable, both to the COB and to, the impact on the community. So certainly where it makes sense, we're excited about that community feedback and input. The last thing I'll say is that we have also started conversations with the Department of Public Safety to understand, where they are and the work they are doing on implementing the recommendations. And part of our goal in having Director Robinson on the call today was to give the community an update on, the topics that have been discussed in previous quarterly public forums, including the dashboard, improving transparency on the work, and other activities that they're taking on to implement those recommendations. Would anyone else on the board or Greg want to speak to that? Okay. The next question is, will you have any oversight of the SET team? And I'm not sure of the answer to that. Do other board members have an idea?
I think what I would say, Julie, is I don't know that we've received sort of a full explanation of, that particular program, how it's going to work. And it's not really clear if the personnel who would be working on that team are uniform personnel that would be, subject to the rules in the ordinance regarding oversight or, violation of policies. So I think that we can't answer the question at this time, but it's something maybe we should flag and we can follow up.
That's great, thank you. The next question is, who is currently the director of the Independent Monitor since the former one left? And Greg Crittenden, who is on the meeting today, raising his hand. Thank you, Greg. Is a deputy monitor and has been in the role of interim monitor since the departure of the existing monitor. What I will say, and Greg, feel free to chime in, is that although we have not had the lead seat filled, it's probably never been a busier time for the Office of the Independent Monitor than it is this past year. And the work very much continues, if not at a steady state, but an increased rate. Greg, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'm actually the senior deputy monitor, and I've also been the senior deputy monitor actually in the office for 15 years. I was the interim between Richard and Nick, and then interim now until we can find someone new to take on this role. And this year we have been real busy working with the Department of Safety as well as AIU and CRU and working on policies. Where we're collaborating together and trying to revise things and improve things. And yeah, our office has been working on a number of things. And so I'll continue in the interim role until someone's found. And boy, just off the top of my head, we're busy. I actually just I put in 12 hours and still going, but that's typical. So I don't know if anyone had any specific questions or to me at all.
I think that's great. The next question is, how much is in the budget approved by the council for the OIM and the COB? I can't speak to the OIM's budget, but I'm wondering if Stefan, if the number is escaping me for what our budget was approved. If you happen to remember, if you want to highlight that.
I didn't, I'll be honest, I didn't remember, but I just pulled it out to refresh my memory. And Greg, keep me honest here, because Greg essentially made the presentation and then I followed up with respect to a couple of issues that were raised by City Council. I believe that the budget that was approved for personnel expenditures is roughly $62,000. That has to do with our administrator, and then the services and supplies that were approved were $27,100. So it's a very modest budget in my view. Greg, you have any thoughts on that? I mean, you can address the OIM and correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
We didn't ask for an expansion this year, kind of waiting to see what the new monitor will want to do and how they'll want to do the office. So we kept our budget the same. And Stefan, I don't have the figures on me. I don't know if you have them there, but I would have to get back to you. I can do some quick looking to see what our budget is. But you're correct, I think, Stefan, as to the Citizen Oversight Board budget.
And I know for other governments it's true, but does the city publish its budget in a place that's available to constituents? So if somebody wanted to
Yes.
follow up, okay. So perhaps we'll follow up with just what is the link for all that, so you could look at all of the budgets of the departments related to this. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. Board members, anything else coming through?
We did get a question via email, and that is how someone becomes a member of the Citizen Oversight Board.
Great question. And very timely, considering we have 2 open positions on the board. We are hoping to fill those as soon as possible, recognizing how much work we have ahead and the clip of that work. So there is a link on the city's website that allows you to apply for the Citizen Oversight Board. From there, there are kind of 2 channels. One channel goes to the mayor and one channel goes to city council for selection and prioritization. There are interviews and then an appointment by the respective groups who have authority there. I understand that, we have maybe a dozen folks who have applied for the 2 open positions. And, we'd love to make sure that we're really getting a lot of interested community members to apply for those positions. Would other board members like to say anything about that process or?
Again, if there are people in the community that you recommend, again, encourage them to apply, as we are always looking for some talented people in the community who are interested and have a passion for this. So for the people who are in the Zoom, I put the link to the boards and commissions page on the chat, and so you'll have access to that there. For everybody else online, I was easily able to Google City of Denver boards and commissions, and you were able to find a direct link.
Thank you. That's awesome. There is a question about what plans there are to follow up on Nick Mitchell's report, the Office of the Independent Monitor's report regarding the George Floyd protests. Would any board member like to answer that? If not, I'm happy to do it. No takers? Okay. So I'll start, and if you've got thoughts, please add in. I would say as part of our ongoing are on the meeting and are happy to join and answer questions from the community. So with that, if you have a question for the Department of Public Safety, please enter that into the Q&A section of the meeting, and they'll do their best to answer. And Mary and Emily, I know we hadn't scheduled you to speak necessarily, but is there anything you'd like to, start off with on behalf of the department? Go ahead, Mary. I see your hand raised.
Sorry, I was having a hard time getting unmuted. First of all, can I just explain for everyone in attendance and as well as the public, we had an officer who was shot at an incident it's less than an hour ago, actually. And so Director Robinson immediately went over to the hospital about 20 minutes after hearing of it. So I'm sorry. I know that he was looking forward to meeting with you all this evening, and we'll try and pinch hit for him. If I could address something that came up, Katina, I think you were talking about the set team and what the set team is going to be and is not. In my opinion, I do not believe that the Office of the Independent Monitor, the Citizen Oversight Board, would have jurisdiction over the set team at this point because, as I understand it, your authority extends to uniformed members of the Denver Police Department and the Denver Fire Department, sworn members of those agencies. The street enforcement team is not sworn members of those agencies. If I can just give you a brief little update on set, it's not yet operational. We are still continuing training. Just this week, they received training on human trafficking and identifying human trafficking, which was provided by the Denver District Attorney's Office. Right now, the members of the set team have been through legal training with the City Attorney's Office, which went through a number of days. Training from the Harm Reduction Action Center, report writing. They received training from HOST that was entitled Informed, Compassionate, Positive Interactions with Persons Experiencing Homelessness. They also received training from the Denver Health Mobile Crisis Response. Scheduled training will still is that yet to be completed is with STAR, mental health first aid, crisis intervention, as well as CPR. You may, if you're out on the streets, you may see set team members shadowing the homeless outreach team with the DPD right now. They may be offering resources, standing by to assist with getting property stored and in that kind of capacity. So they are being acquainted with some of the individuals out on the street right now. We anticipate they're going to become operational by the end of the month. Unfortunately, we've had to stretch out the deployment of this team, partly based on some issues that we had in supply chain with getting uniforms. Part of the issue with getting them out there is we want them to be easily identifiable. So it's important that they be in uniform. And so until that can happen, we're not going to actually have them operating, even if they are fully trained out. The uniforms are going to be gray polo shirts with the Denver Public Safety logo, their names monogrammed on the front, as well as identifiable winter gear. So, pardon me, my phone's barking. That's going to be one of our issues that may prevent them from being out on the streets by the end of the month. But that's the set team update that I can give you. Does anybody have any questions on that? Karen's got her hand raised.
You're muted, Karen.
Sorry for attending our meeting this evening. I'm curious as to the types of folks who are making up the set team. Can you give us a little background on what they do, or what their interests are in being part of the team?
We have two people, one person who's a former paramedic, one person who has some paramedic training. We have a person who used to work with the right-of-way enforcement team in the city. I'm trying to go through. We have a person who used to be employed in the photo enforcement unit of the city. I'm trying to go through where everyone came from, and I wish I could go 2 doors down and grab Armando Saldate, who's over.
Mary, this is Elise. I'm happy to help out here if you like.
Because you probably got that information right in front of you.
I do. Good evening, everyone. Forgive me. I'm a little bit under the weather, so please forgive my voice as I'm sipping tea this evening. My name is Elise Ron. I'm the Community and Government Affairs Manager with the Department of Safety. And for easy reference for members of the community listening tonight, as well as COB members, I believe COB members, I sent over the PowerPoint and briefing sheet over on October 1st that includes information. It was and a lot of other details, so you can reference that. Or it's also available on the City Council website. I'm happy to put that link into the chat for everybody to access the documents and videos to make sure that it's easily accessible. I know sometimes it's hard to find things on the website as you're searching. But to answer a little bit more about the team members, we did include in that City Council presentation in September demographics and background. The demographics breakdown includes 2 Hispanic males, 1 Hispanic female, 1 white male, 1 white female, and 1 Black male, ensuring to have diverse representation of the team and for the community that we serve. The background, as Mary spoke to, includes a paramedic, experience in youth corrections and human services, and encampment outreach. In fact, the set or street enforcement team, I saw a question in the chat, the street enforcement team supervisor and the team lead both came from EIT, the early intervention team, who spent the last year doing outreach to small encampments here in Denver to provide resources. So really have that resource expertise. As Mary mentioned, a photo enforcement background for another member, and then compliance and corrections background, and then volunteers and police services. And the supervisor also does hold a bachelor's degree. So all of that is in that PowerPoint. Again, I'll make sure when I mute here to grab that link and put it in the chat for everybody. Thanks.
Mary, any other topics you'd like to cover? Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. I think there were some things that you all wanted that you had raised as issues, and I'm not sure if you want to follow up with things on the chat and see how much time we have on that. You go ahead and let me know. Because I know what some of the issues that you raised. I don't know if you want us to just address some of those.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, one of the questions that came up was the Aramark food service at DSD. And I know that Sheriff Diggins spoke to you on Friday about that. Do you want further information? Do you want to go through that again?
I think for the purposes of this meeting, a quick summary for the community is useful as it came up on our last quarterly public forum.
Okay, great. So just as sort of a background so that we can put this all in perspective as far as the grievances. We looked at the grievances that were submitted between July 1st and September 14th that were related to food service in both facilities, both the downtown detention center as well as the county jail. And during this time, there were a total of 321 grievances filed related to food service during this time period. During that time period, we served approximately 348,750 meals during that time period. So, and though I'm not saying, I don't want to say that a small number means we're doing a great job, because honestly, food is essential when you're in a facility. And I know that when you're in a facility, the meal service is really important, but I still think it's important to just kind of frame this. We looked at the variety of trying to group in what the grievances were about. 25% were on quality, taste, content. 23% were on quantity. 14% were about powdered milk being served, and we can explain some of what that whole powdered milk issue was about. 11% were about food temperature. 8.5% were on medical diet, allergies and such. 7.5% were on religious diet. There were some other lesser ones. Some of the complaints were associated with some equipment issues. One was refrigeration issues. We had some refrigerators that went out, milk spoilage that led to the utilization of powdered milk. And so we also had a lack of hard trays to serve meals, and they were being served on styrofoam, which doesn't hold the food temperature in the same manner. Again, some of that's some supply chain issues that we've had on that. Some of the specific complaints that COB received, one was that a person in custody complained that they chipped their tooth due to what they perceived was a rock in their meal. One was a person who complained finding a metal screw. We're not sure if that was related to a piece of a bread mixer that broke. Another person believed a small spider fell out of a cookie when it was broken prior to eating it. So we've gone ahead and looked at all of those issues. We're addressing those issues. We have a major who remains actively engaged in food service activities and is monitoring the food service that's being provided and is regularly reporting to the sheriff. So I think that's probably a quick overview, unless there's some additional questioning on that or something else that you thought, Julia, that we needed to bring up on that. But I want everyone to understand that we do take the food service and the obligation that we have to provide healthy meals. And if somebody has food allergies or if someone has religious needs as far as their food, that's something that we have to provide to anyone within our care, custody, and control. Not only is that humanely required, that's just the right thing to do. So we do take these issues seriously. Granted, it's not going to be a restaurant. Yeah, there are going to be times where people are just going to get fed up eating some of the same stuff, but it's something that I think the sheriff's very much on. Stefan?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. It's my understanding from my recollection from the discussion with Sheriff Diggins on Friday that he said that some of the complaints were validated.
Yes.
Can you address that? Provide a little bit more detail on what you found to be valid and what's, what remedial measures are being taken to correct those issues?
Well, part of the problem, I know that some of the complaints specific related to milk spoilage and the amount of milk and the food that we lost as a result of that. So we were using powdered milk, and there may have been a point where some people were in fact given some spoiled milk before that was realized. I'm trying to go over these and see if I don't know that I have any specific notes on that. And unfortunately, I was on the road when I was listening to the COB meeting on that day. So I can't specify on that unless Elise has any further information on that one.
I believe Emily has her hand raised, Mary.
Okay, Emily, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Emily Locke, I'm the Director of Transformation and Policy with the Department of Public Safety. Thanks so much for having us tonight. I just wanted to follow on what Mary indicated as well. I believe that some of the remedial efforts that were taken, I believe the sheriff spoke specifically to concerns around the quantity of the food provided, and then also in terms of the consistent, I'll call it delivery of the food. So for example, adding quality assurance checks and making sure that those appear or that those occur regularly, specifically so that items like salt and pepper are provided with the meals every time. Those were some of the items that were not occurring in some of the substantiated or validated complaints, I should say. And then additionally, he is assigned a Major Lance Alexander, who oversees the county jail specifically to work with the vendor, make sure those quality checks are occurring, to make sure that the quantity of the food provided is appropriate. My understanding is that there is also a nutritionist that reviews the menus prior to them being served to the persons who are in our custody. And so making sure that those standards are met as well around the quantity of the food. So I think those were just a couple quick examples off the top of my head as well.
Thanks, Em. Thank you, Emily.
Other board questions for the Department of Public Safety representatives? Okay, I do see a community member question from an anonymous attendee. Would it be possible to have an ex-police officer on the set team? I suppose they might be able to help with the link between law enforcement and the community.
Thank you. I think that right now, because we do work very closely with the officers who are on what was described the HOT team, previously designated as the Homeless Outreach Team, we are presently having that link with the law enforcement. Having a former officer on the set team, as we hope to possibly expand if the pilot that we're working right now is successful, that's certainly something we could consider.
Okay, Daniel, any questions come in via email, or board members, any other questions from the community?
I think we were hoping for just a status update on the dashboard for the 112 recommendations. And we have Emily Locke here who's handling that.
Sure. So our work is absolutely continuing in working on our review and our response to the community task force recommendations. We met with the task force most recently on October 11th. And then on October 25th, the executive branch city agencies participating in the review presented to City Council to provide an update on our work. And I believe Elise has a link to that council presentation to go more in depth about the examples that we provided of the responses. We provided a demonstration of the dashboard tool that we had also, I believe, discussed at the last quarterly public forum with you as well, and the format that we'll be providing out those responses. In addition, we directly received some feedback from this board and from this meeting requesting that we really put a specific lens towards accessibility and making sure that our progress reports out, as well as the dashboard in particular, are accessible to community members. So with that, I have also been meeting, and the team has also been meeting with the Mayor's Office of Social Equity and Innovation, the Office on Disability Rights, the city's webmaster and team, and also the Human Rights and Community Partnerships staff, as well as some of the commissions to discuss accessibility standards, again, to do a demonstration of the dashboard, to help understand what are those compliance standards, what are those areas that we need to be mindful of. So as part of our process in the responses, we are collecting the responses together into an executive summary responsive to each of the recommendations. And as part of that, we're putting that through a full accessibility review, which is involving reviewing those for items such as reading comprehension level to aid with language translation accuracy, and also for high contrast in the use of the fonts and the colors and things of that nature. So we're working through that process right now with the city teams so that we can make sure that this is accessible. We're also working on developing out what are our mechanisms for communication around our status updates and our responses as well for members of community who are interested in this information, but don't have access to or prefer to receive updates of this nature through technology and through a dashboard tool. So we're actively in that process. And at this time, we anticipate having 25 to 30% of our responses posted in the coming weeks. And then from there, our goal is to have a monthly update of a batch of responses as well, so that there can be a semi-regular cadence, if you will, of information made available.
Thank you so much for that update, Emily, particularly with the accessibility issues. I know I raised that last time, and I'm glad that it's being responded to and can be accessible to everyone in our community. Next question that came through the Q&A is, I would like to hear responses about the lack of disciplinary charges and the seeming light actions taken by the department related to the complaints from protests last year. I know for us, we are still, there's a lot of open pending cases still being processed. And so we don't have an entire full scope of the extent to the complaints that have been raised and full discipline just yet. I know it's been a long time since June, July of 2020, but this is something that, again, we want to continue to be accountable for in getting some of this data and examining this in the months to come. I don't know if anybody else on here has any updates or numbers that they want to report regarding complaints related to the protests. Mary?
Thank you. I can give a bit of an update. These were the last numbers that I had, but they aren't, Greg Crittenden, feel free to jump in if you think my numbers are way off. I believe that there were 123 cases that were opened related to the protests. Of those, the last I knew, 15 were still open, but we may have another one or two that since that time, we may have a couple more that are in the process. I'm not certain of that, but of the 108 completed cases, none resulted in criminal charges against officers. I want folks to understand what the process was, that once the investigation was opened, the potential for criminal charges, these cases were passed over to the district attorney's office for review. And that did take some time. So I just want to be real frank with people. I'm not saying that's what took so long, but that is what kind of slows down the process when you have the potential for a criminal case to be reviewed by the district attorney. That will also slow down the process. Let me get this breakdown. I need another screen here. We had 28 cases that were declined because we were unable to identify the officer. The protests were rapidly evolving events. And even though we may have thought, you know, these officers were assigned at one point, officers were moving around a lot. And unless we could identify by a lot of video, and this, Greg could attest to this as well, these cases involved lots and lots and lots of video. We had halo video, we had body cam video, we had citizen video, we had so many community members who provided video for us too. Sometimes we didn't have clear enough video to identify who an officer was. So 28 were declined because we were unable to identify the officer. 24, the complainant who may have made the complaint would not respond back when we tried to get them to follow up and provide further information or a statement. We did not hear back from those folks. So 24 were closed out because of that. There were 20 that were declined because no misconduct was found based on the initial review. And I believe that the monitor reviewed every single one of these too and found that based on what we had here at that point, there was no further investigation required because they were within policy. 9 were handled as service complaints, which are generally where we have more minor types of violations, more minor types of complaints. So that can be a minor discourtesy to other types of things that are handled in a low-level fashion. 6 we identified were non-DPD officers. We did not have jurisdiction over those non-DPD officers from other agencies who came to assist. 5 were exonerated in that there was not, and generally those were cases where body cam or other video footage, that is not clearly what happened. So that's where an exonerated finding came in. 4 cases were not sustained. 4 were declined based on actual body cam footage, which showed that was not what happened. 3 were handled informally. 2 were not reviewed or retired. 1, the complainant actually withdrew their complaint. We had we have 2 different officers whose cases are still under appeal. So I have to be very careful in talking about those. 1 officer was suspended for 10 days for violating the chemical agents and munitions policy. Another officer was suspended for 6 days after an inappropriate force case. We had 1 officer that received an oral reprimand for a body-worn camera violation policy and body-worn camera policy violations are scheduled discipline. So that's why that came out as an oral reprimand. but the inappropriate force case against him was declined. One was an officer who received a written reprimand for violating social media policy. I understand that people may feel that there were a lot of incidents that should have been disciplined, but I just want people to also understand the complexity of these cases, the amount of video review. I think we took the situation seriously, and where we did in fact have violations, we disciplined. For example, on those two officers, it was clear that there were violations there. But all of these investigations with the oversight of the independent monitor's office took a long time, partly just because of all of the video. And sometimes in these chaotic, ever-changing events, it is hard to actually identify officers or actually identify a violation. What may have seemed as a violation, at one set of eyes, when there's when you're looking at all of the video and you can see what the officers were facing, there may be some justification that may not have been as apparent during the heat of the moment. There may have been some justification, and some of the officers' actions may have been within policy and or training at that time too. So it's hard to just make generalizations, but that's the best I can. I don't want to make it seem, I'm defending what seems like a lot of cases that didn't come out as a sustained case. But I think that when you have that breakdown that I gave you, you can understand what the difficulties were in actually identifying some of these individuals that may have had some sustained violations. That's probably the best I can say at this point. But I see Katina's got her hand up. Hi, Katina.
Hi, Deputy Director, Executive Director.
Oh, just call me Mary, please.
No, thank you, Mary, for that summary. I think it's helpful. I know we had it and we shared it publicly, but for purposes of this discussion, it's very helpful to have that framework. My question, it's kind of twofold. It pertains to those cases where the offending officer or the accused officer was not a DPD officer. And so there wasn't, I guess, jurisdiction to enforce our policies. I think I want to know, I guess, can you give us a sense of how serious those charges were, or, how harmed were the people involved? And if there was any sort of referral to the departments where those officers actually came from? Because I think as a citizen of Denver, if I was seriously injured, or I felt as though, there was use of force that was inappropriate, and I was just told, well, sorry, that wasn't, that wasn't our officer, we can't do anything about it. I don't know, that'd be cold comfort. And then I think related to that is understand that in response to the monitor's office report on the protests, the department had agreed to work on negotiating agreements with other police departments in the area. And I guess I just want to know is this issue fixed in the future? If there's a problem, Denver decides that it needs help from a neighboring agency, are we going to be able to hold those officers accountable for not following our policies here in Denver?
So you've got a bunch of different points there. So remind me when I don't touch on one of them.
Yeah.
All of those cases were referred back to the agency where the officer came from. We have agreed that there will be no mutual aid from another agency who comes in without our requiring that they follow our use of force policy. They will not be able to bring in any unauthorized weapons that we don't authorize, and they will have to follow our use of force policy. That is part of the agreement that we have as part of the stipulations that we've made in some of the federal court actions as well. So we will not be engaging with any agency who does not in fact follow our use of force policy. We can't do that. They have to be. So that's we have 2 mutual aid agreements that are presently in effect. And what these both say, I'm going to read from them. Adherence to this agreement entails only the equipment authorized by the DPD. They will abide by the direction of DPD commanding officers regarding use of force and crowd control techniques. They will have to wear body-worn cameras. They will have to follow our policies. So we're still working on this. We made a commitment that any mutual aid agreements that we enter into will require that the officers abide by our use of force policies. So.
Thank you for that, Mary. So just clarifying question, or maybe it's 2. So with regard to the cases that did arise that got referred back to the other agencies, do we know what happened with them? Or did those agencies investigate them? Was any action taken?
I do not know that, honestly. I don't know if Greg knows that either. I mean, that's kind of beyond our stretch. I understand why it would be a good thing to know, but I honestly don't know. I don't know if there was any follow-up with those agencies as far as that. I really don't. I wish I could add a better answer for you, but I don't. This
Right.
is such an onslaught of work that none of us anticipated, that I think that going beyond and following up with the other agencies to see what they did certainly wasn't within our office's purview, and I don't know if anyone did.
Right. Well, I think, these other agencies came into Denver and are accused of, some harm or basically taking action against our citizens in a way that our citizens took issue with. So I feel like we should probably know. I think my other clarifying question is, when you're describing the mutual aid agreements that we now have in place and the commitment you've made, I think my question is, we're requiring them to do these things, that they have to follow our policies. What's our recourse if they don't? Can we then take action if we need to? I mean, what happens if, even though they've agreed that they're going to come and provide aid and follow our policies, what if they violate our policies? Is that?
Well, I'm trying to look through the actual wording on this. And I mean, clearly, they're still potentially liable for this. I'm trying to find out. I mean, I think that our clear action would be, we would be able to terminate this.
So our only way to hold them accountable if they violate our policies, providing mutual aid, is to terminate the agreement?
Oh, I'm trying, and honestly, I'm just trying to skim through this right now, and that may be a better question for the city attorney's office. I'm not trying to punt here. This wasn't something that I was involved in drafting, and so I'm just kind of like trying to skim through this and see what our recourse would be. I think that's probably a better question for the lawyers, for the city attorney's office. I know that's not satisfying. I'm not trying to hide behind the lawyers, but
no, I hear you, Mary. I think you understand what I'm trying to get at is, right, if we can't hold them accountable, are they going to hold themselves accountable, right? I mean, where's that piece of the puzzle if there's a violation of, if there's some inappropriate use of force by another agency against a Denver citizen? I want to know what can be done about it.
Yeah, Katina,
Yeah.
just to jump in for a quick second, I've written a few of these. Normally, and I don't know what's in Denver's, but I do know that generally there's an indemnification clause somewhere, and there should, and generally with MOAs, there's a way for the partner providing mutual aid to get repaid for a portion of or all of their costs for providing mutual aid. So I'm not sure if there's a callback provision in these, but that is a good question for the city attorney. I mean, what is the recourse for breach of contract, which is really what we're talking about here. So, I mean, I hope there's some recourse. It would be kind of silly if there wasn't. I know that's not satisfying either. So I'm going to go back to being quiet.
A lot of unsatisfying answers. We will take the action item to follow up with the city attorney's office and provide information on this. I think it's a really great question. And go ahead, Stephen.
Thanks, Julia. So, Mary, there have been, I mean, thank you for the summary of the disciplinary cases that arose out of the protest. This may well, and as a lawyer, I understand that you may not be able to get into some of this, but there've been a lot of press lately about litigation that has been filed against the city. Obviously, you can't comment on that, arising from injuries that people sustained during the protests. Is there some overlap between people who have brought those lawsuits and people who have brought complaints in the disciplinary through the disciplinary process? Again, I know you can't comment legally on them, but is there some overlap there? Because I'm sure that the community is well aware, is probably much more aware of those lawsuits as they've been publicized by the Denver Post and otherwise than any internal disciplinary proceeding. I'm just wondering if there's some overlap there.
Some of the overlap that you're talking about in some of the recently filed cases, and do we have discipline in those cases?
Yes.
I hesitate to speak specifically onto those cases. The city attorney's office would probably strongly encourage me not to be speaking on those specific cases. I believe that, but I think that what they've said in at least one of the cases is that we were unable to identify an officer. So I can't say for certain if we, the two cases that I think you're referring to, I do not recall, and Greg Crittenden can certainly tell me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that those two cases came through the disciplinary process to our level of a disciplinary process. So yeah, Greg's kind of raising his eyes and trying to think, but
yeah, I'm not sure on which ones have or have not, so I don't want to speak out of turn on it as well. I know that your numbers sounded right in regards to, I think, how many cases are potentially still open and how many cases were investigated and went through the process. I'm not sure about the other figures, Mary, or where we were at on those. But we will be looking at those. Our office will as well, and reporting on that in the future once we get all those cases completed. As for the lawsuits, I'm not exactly sure.
And again, I wasn't asking anybody to comment on the substance of the lawsuits. I was just wondering if there was if there was a disciplinary action, the same person filed a disciplinary proceeding complaint who has filed the lawsuit. That was my question. I think you understood that, Mary. Yeah.
I don't know that I totally understood that. I believe that at least in one of them that they did file a complaint.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We have another community member question. Is a 6-day suspension normal for inappropriate use of force? Is 10 days the minimum for chemical agent misuse?
So all of our discipline is based on the disciplinary matrix. And this is going to sound kind of complicated, but so for each rule and regulation violation, there is a range of, there is a range of conduct categories that are assigned to that specific rule violation. And then what the role of the reviewers and then actually the people who impose the discipline is to try and determine what the appropriate conduct category is based on the facts. These are all available online for anybody who wants to look at them. Then once you have established what the conduct category is, which really is based on what is the harm, what is the potential harm, what was the consequence of the misconduct, then there is a disciplinary matrix which assigns a discipline level, and then that discipline level will have a range of penalties. So just, I think that it's more complicated than what the question technically is. I think that's the best way I can answer it. The use of the chemical agents in the case, again, you're looking at what you have to look at all of the circumstances surrounding it, just like with the use of force. What is the use of force? What are the circumstances surrounding it? And what are the harms? So the disciplinary handbook, the conduct categories are all meant to kind of, it's not like it's a cookie cutter thing. You have to follow what the facts lead you to and what fits best with the facts. And so that's how those disciplinary decisions are made. You can find those 2 disciplinary orders specifically. They have been sent out publicly, and those 2 orders are available. One is Streeter and the other is, why am I spacing the name? They are both available on, if you just even Google them, they're going to be available. So Streeter was the 10 days. And if you hold on just a moment, I can give you the name on the other. Archuleta. So, okay.
I believe there's also, discipline is also covered in the Office of the Independent Monitor's semi-annual and annual reports. They have summaries of significant discipline, and they just released their semi-annual report, so you can see that online and also get a more detailed overview of all the discipline that has been issued, pending or not pending, but completed in the past 6 months to a year.
Thank you. Other board questions for the Department of Public Safety representative? Okay, thank you for all the questions so far. And as we sort of get close to the end of our meeting, I'll just open it up to community members for any additional questions, comments, concerns that you may have that you would like the board to address or guests on this call. All right. Well, with that, I'll wrap our meeting up. Just a reminder to community members that our board meets the first and third Fridays of the month. Those meetings are public and you are welcome to attend. We try to post the link as quickly as we have it for those meetings. So please join us if you'd like. A reminder that we are looking for 2 new board members and get your application in ASAP if you are interested. And stay tuned for more information about the hiring process for the Independent Monitor. We're looking forward to engaging you in that. So thank you very much to all the board members in attendance, community members for your questions, and representatives of the Office of the Independent Monitor and Department of Public Safety. We really appreciate the dialogue tonight. Thank you so much.
Record.